welcome back to OD skills. Even though I find OD skills a little odd, I am using that abbreviation deliberately today because as I introduced in the first week of class, we can refer to OD as organizational development or organizational design skills. Today, though, I would like to suggest a third possibility, organizational diversity skills, because I want to talk to you about how NCRP, at least in the ways that I understand and teach NCRP, is perfectly situated for bridging and embracing cultural difference. Now, some of you have taken 503 and 504 with me, Ethics of NCRP and Theories of Conflict, and you have used my first publication, a workbook that I developed years ago, a curriculum, interactive curriculum for teaching multicultural dispute resolution. So you have already been introduced to how I view NCRP when it comes to cross-cultural and multicultural collaboration, leadership, conflict resolution. For those of you who have not taken these courses with me, you have been reading chapters in your reader for the last few weeks, which elaborate the details of how I see the skills that we teach as ideally situated for multicultural work. Some of you know that I grew up with 3 different languages and cultures. And so I was born into a multicultural family of relatively recent immigration to this country. I struggled actually in higher education to find the skills and the knowledge that would actually relate to my world experience, excite me with their relevance, their effectiveness. And so when I discovered integrative win-win negotiation, mediation, the many other skills and processes of NCRP, you can imagine how thrilled I was. These skills, every single one of them, and there are many that we introduce you to in this program, truly make a difference in so many areas of our life, personal and professional. And I have continued to write about this and publish about this as I do NCRP with cultures around the world. To date, I have worked with students, clients, colleagues from, I would imagine around 90 different countries and many more cultures. Everything about NCRP facilitates cross-cultural relationship, but for the sake of my lecture this week, relationship that results in, stimulates innovation, creativity. If you think about it, and if some of you get excited after reading the chapters that are in your reader and want to read more, let me introduce you to the first book that I ever edited several years ago, Approaches to Managing Organizational Diversity and Innovation. I think this is available electronically through the DH library. I hope so. You will find authors from several countries writing about this, countries like Thailand, China, France, UK, Australia, and the United States. And they will give you an even broader exposure to the possibilities. You will also see my introduction where I once again detail how I see the skills of NCRP making the difference. Now, it is one thing in our program to be introduced to these skills, the skills of careful, insightful listening, the skills of reframing, the skills of empathy, but it is quite another to practice and develop these skills in a multicultural environment. And fortunately, our community here, our students will often tell you that after completing our program and graduating, one of the transformational results of our program is that they, despite being what they would describe as open-minded people concerned with world peace, you know, some of the best of people, have discovered more bias and prejudice than they ever imagined they had. And that can only happen if you practice these skills across cultural difference. And fortunately, our community, even the online community, is an international multicultural community where you can have these safe, supportive dialogues and learn more about yourself, because you will see in these readings the biggest obstacles that organizations face with their diversity today is prejudice, bias, at its worst, discrimination against groups, some of whom, well, one of whom I belong to, based on gender, women, but all the other biases and prejudices that we see in the world today based on race, color, language, religion, sexual preference. One of my students just did a wonderful research paper on weight and obesity and that prejudice. Organizations are clusters of different people with different bias and prejudice. And so suspending judgment to have an open mind is a critical first step. Let me share my experience with Americans over the years. And maybe you can hear one of or more of my accents. I certainly have them, especially when I'm around people from the cultures where I grew up. But what I've found with Americans is they can be, and this is overly simplistic, but let me share this, and I'm open for discussion. They can be categorized into two groups. Those whose minds are relatively open to people from around the world, to different cultures, different accents throughout the United States. And when they hear an accent, they understand. Let's assume English is being spoken rather than another language. They understand what that person is saying. The other group, sadly, even though the people speaking may speak more perfect English than someone born here with English as their first language, that group will close their mind to understanding anything that person is saying because the judgment that is sparked by hearing accent is so thick. And so this is one of the barriers that organizations face as well. Unpacking, revealing, transforming all those layers of prejudice that so many human beings rely on to feel secure in their own skin, in their own comfort zone. Here's another example. I have wonderful classrooms on campus at Dominguez Hills, as diverse as my online, international classroom. And so I have students, several from African nations, several from Asian nations, several from Middle Eastern countries, all in the classroom together with my students from California, Southern California, primarily. And despite everything we do in NCRP, I inevitably still have a few American born and raised white students who, when they hear and experience someone from a different culture, they immediately judge them in inaccurate ways. At its rudest and crudest, they call the person a jerk or rude. They're simply not open to or able to appreciate that we all operate very differently in our own cultures and our worlds. We talk differently, we listen differently, we have different tones, eye contact. There's so many differences. And if you're curious, my intercultural conflict course is a wonderful place to explore this more. But this is the barrier that NCRP can help people with, the first barrier, judgment. Once they have been able to do that, and I would recommend you practice NCRP skills with people from other cultures than your own, again and again, to a point where you have strong enough relationships where you can ask them for honest feedback. Do they feel deeply heard and understood by you? Do they feel judged by you? I have to do this with all the work I do around the world because I can't assume that people in Norway are going to experience me the same as the West Bank in the Middle East. It's just not the world we live in. Keep doing that and you'll learn a lot about yourself and how other people experience you. And then I would encourage you to keep going because every one of these skills, as you will read in the reading, lays the perfect climate environment for what organizations are seeking with innovation. Now, briefly, innovation in an organizational world normally means applied response to community, client, customer need. It's very much an applied creativity that meets market need, that meets government, community need. Difference is what is needed for innovation. We must step out of our comfort zone. You hear the phrase, think outside the box. Well, the box is our own comfort zone. So what you are seeking is there with a cross-cultural relation. Take the challenge as a learning opportunity, as a wonderful way to enrich your life. I would ask you, I don't have much longer to talk today, but I certainly once again welcome questions from the reading and dialogue. How many cross-cultural relations do you have in your life today? If the answer can be counted on one hand, you've got to catch up with the changing world and expand that. Now you'll be able to do it in our class. You just need to start asking your classmates about their cultural background. And then as you do, please continue to practice these skills because it's a lifetime. It's a lifetime practice, which I am continuing for the rest of my life, developing these skills in cross-cultural, multicultural relations. Now, obviously, it's something I enjoy and relish. It's the best part of my life. But then I grew up with 3 cultures. And half of my family has married outside of those cultures. We love this. We see it as a colorful, engaged, growth-filled life. Would it have been easy for us if we hadn't been born into a multicultural family? Probably not. But as you build these relationships, here are some of the things you will discover. The power of deeply understanding and identifying common ground. That in and of itself will transform organizational relationships. Maybe that's the assignment I'll give you for this week, along with the others in your reader. Have a great week.